Lemon tree, very pretty, and the lemon flower is sweet, but the fruit of the poor lemon is impossible to eat. Lemon tree, very pretty, and the lemon flower is sweet, but the fruit of the poor lemon is impossible to eat.
Hello and welcome to Lemonade Life Podcast. I'm Michelle Faust, and I'm here today with Jaclyn Whitt with the Family Friendly Screenwriting Academy. Super excited because we've got some really different things to talk about today. Jaclyn is formerly from the great country of Canada, now living in Mexico. I bet it's a little warmer there.
Definitely.
And so she and her husband Jeff and her son are living in Mexico and running their Screenwriting Academy. I had the most fascinating conversation, Jaclyn, when we met in Denver about the idea of actually getting our stories up on the big screen. And how can we do that? Because, that's what we do here with Lemonade Legend is get people's stories out in writing, publishing in books and in magazines, in the podcast. And now we're venturing into how can we get those stories in a script for the big screen. So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, well, an author has basically three paths in order to get it onto the screen. Okay, they can either pitch their book to a producer, or they can hire a screenwriter to write the script, pitch that to a producer, or write it themselves and pitch that to a producer.
Okay.
Now, each one, I'm just going to briefly go over this because I know we have other things we want to get into, but this is just really brief. So if you do pitch your book to a producer, let's say they love it. The thing that's going to happen, though, is they're going to choose their own writer to put on it, and you lose creative control pretty much entirely. Depending on what producer you get, some producers will be great and they'll work with you, but technically you've done your part, and then they're going to take it from there. And so you do lose some of that. If you hire a screenwriter or you write it yourself, you're going to maintain that creative control so that the script in the end is going to reflect the story that you wanted to tell.
So obviously we're going to want to know what's the best way to try to approach things. It just sounds like you have some options based on, I suppose, how much work you want to hand over to somebody else or how much control you want to maintain. I think that the thing that I wanted to talk about initially, to myself, writing a book, that's not scary. But writing a script is a little scary. It just seems so like that happens to other people, And then when we were talking, you really gave me the sense of, no, it's really a doable thing. It's not something that just some amazing Hollywood person goes out and does, but it's really something that I myself, my clients, anybody who wants to turn their book, their story into a script can actually do.
Absolutely. And I'll explain to you, like, some people think like, oh, it's such a big project, but let me just kind of, if I'm talking to authors, let me just talk some very simple things here. So let's say that your book is 50,000 words. Okay. That's a 5-hour audiobook. That's longer than a movie. You already taken on a project that is bigger than writing a movie. Yep. So in screenwriting, we don't count words, we count pages, because there's a certain way that you format things, which I know the formatting might seem intimidating, but it's something you learn in a weekend. It's really not that difficult to adjust to a different way of formatting words on a page. And it all makes sense anyways when you realize it. But each page equals 1 minute of screen time on average. So that's why we have the certain way that we format things. But with that also, that means if you want to write a movie that's an hour and a half, you write a 90-page script. So it's actually not that complicated. And that's not very long. 90 pages. I mean, how many pages is your book? Go and check, right?
Well, Exactly. We work with a minimum 100 pages for a book. And the reason for that is simply because you need at least 100 pages so that spine can actually fit your title out. So that's kind of the rule there. So in that context, 90 pages versus a minimum of 100 pages is not a big deal. But I also know that there is a format that's very important. We talked about it a little bit, that you really have to turn your writing into visual writing. How is it going to project in a visual sense?
Yes, and that is the biggest difference between writing a book and writing a screenplay, is that I know when you're writing a book, show, don't tell, right?
Okay.
But when you're writing a movie, it's even more so, because everything has to be perceived through what you see and hear, and that is it. There is no inside information.
So would you recommend, if somebody is writing it off, they're using the book, is there a big difference between already having the book written or having it in your mind that you're going to want to turn this book into a script? Are you going to write it a little bit differently? Or is it really the taking from the book you've written and turning it into the script?
Yeah, a lot of that is going to depend on a few factors, which will make sense as I explain them. So one of the other differences between writing a book and writing a screenplay is that we have to keep budget in mind when we write a movie. Mm-hmm. And so that also means I have to keep track of how many characters I have, because every character means adding another actor. That's adding to the budget. So it's not to say that I can't have a lot of characters, but I have to choose them wisely, right? We want to make sure we're putting our money to its best use. And then also locations. Every location is a new set, which means somebody has to go there, set everything up, they film, and then they have to take it all down. So you can't do more than one setting in a day. So the more settings you have means the more days of filming. So that also adds to the budget. So those are two of the most things that people have to think about. I mean, there's other things like children and animals, and those all add to the budget too. Again, it's not to say you can't include them, but you have to be conscious of what you're building when you're writing a screenplay. So if there's a book that has a lot of characters in it, you may have to combine some characters in order to make it fit for the screen. And that's why sometimes when you read the book, you're like, hey, that guy had 4 kids, but in the movie, he only had 1. Well, there you go. That's a big part of why that happens. And same with certain storylines. Like I mentioned earlier, if you have a 50,000 word book, that's 5 hours. You got to cut that down to a 2-hour movie. Some things are going to give here and there, right? Like some part of it, just taking out all the inside information. That's what I call it. That's where, you understand certain things because it's written on the page, but you don't actually visually see it, right? Like maybe she has this memory of something that happened in the past, which then affects her decision now. Well, that's not so easy to show in a movie unless you create that visual memory, right?
Right.
So when you take all of that information out so that it's completely objective, right, then you're going to cut down quite a bit. But we still got to get it down further. And so some of that means taking out a storyline or combining storylines or characters and things like that. That's why the movie is often different than the book.
Well, that explains a lot, because I'm a pretty avid reader, and I'm always thinking that when it's like, wait a minute, that wasn't the way the book was, or they left this out, but I understand the reality going from a book to a movie is that you're going to have to change a few things or drop some things that don't transfer, so to speak, well to the screen. But how do you help people to get that story out there? I'm sure you have different services, but just kind of, if I'm interested and I would say, Jaclyn, can you help me put this book into a screenplay? What's the first thing you're going to tell me to do?
Okay. If you want to write it yourself, then you've already gotten further in the process than a lot of people that just have an idea and don't have a book. Because as you were structuring your book, making the outline and the plot and all of that, you already did a lot of that work. So what you would do is, instead of taking the book, you would go back to that work that you did at the beginning, where you were plotting and creating that structure so that you could draw that out and then fit it into what works for the screen. So, for example, we still have an inciting incident. You know what that is, right? You've got that already in your structure plan. The break into Act 2. So you tell me, because I'm not in the author world as much. So is there like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3? That's a normal thing?
Well, similar. So at least when I am coaching my authors in the process, I have them put together an outline first. So that may be sort of the book form of an Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. Is putting it into that type of a structure. So you have to have the interesting beginning, the grabbing beginning, and introducing all the characters and what you're going to be talking about, and then you break it down into your subsections of the story, and then of course then you have to wrap it all up in a nice neat bow. So I suppose you could take that outline, I'm thinking, easily and create it into more of a Act 1, Act 2 type of a thing.
Absolutely. So if I said to you, okay, there's this thing that happens that kind of sparks a change in their normal, right? But then when they decide to actually go on that journey, when they take that step toward, yes, I'm doing this, and they head out, that is the beginning of Act 2, because you've got your beginning, that's all your setup. And then the middle, that's where the story actually happens. All of that growth happens there. And then the last part is the climax and the falling action kind of thing, right? And so when I draw out these moments, because in a movie, it's very specific because it's according to page count, and it's because it's according to time. You have 20 minutes to do all of your setup, and then you need to be into that story. Otherwise, people are going to be like, when is this going to go somewhere? So there are a little bit more rules. They do make sense, but you would be able to say, okay, that's that moment where my character is all in and they're on this journey, even though they don't know what they're doing yet.
Let's say a story has 10, 11, 12 chapters. The way I'm understanding it is maybe there's going to be 3 or 4 chapters that kind of combine to Act 1. And then you might have the 3 or 4 that'll be that main Act 2 part of the story. And then again, you're just going to wrap it up. So it's still the 3 acts, but we're just taking the chapters and combining them in a way that's a flow for the screen.
Yeah. And to allow for the emotional journey that we want to take our audience on. And some of it is going to be like just different terminology, but as soon as I explain, this is the purpose for this particular element, you'll be like, I know what that is. Okay, we're good.
So do you generally find that the people you work with kind of say, this is easier than I thought, or have kind of that revelation that it wasn't this mysterious thing that I thought it was going to be?
Yes, once they take the class, because if you try to go into it on your own and you have no experience with scripts at all, like never even seen one, that's going to be pretty daunting and you might not know where to start. But if you have someone that breaks it down and gives you that step by step and then sends you on your way, you're going to be in a much better position to actually do that. And that's why I created my 7-week beginner screenwriting class. It's called Screenwriting Foundations. But the whole thing is to develop the story, the structure, to know exactly where you're going, to understand how the format works, and then getting started. By the end of it, like, you need to write at least one scene so that I can read it, make sure you're on the right track, and then you could take it from there. But you'll have your plot outline set up, because that's the part where a lot of people don't get it. Same with, I'm sure, when you're working with people that are wanting to write a book and they just sit down and start writing and they didn't plan anything first. Right. And they end up with writer's block, and it's just like, where's your story going? Right. So it's the same thing for writing.
I'm sure that's pretty similar. So that you have a 7-week course. Is that more of a one-on-one, or is that a group structure?
It's a group. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's not a large group. It maxes out at 15, but usually there's about 7 in the class, which is a pretty good number. because there's enough time for people to ask questions. And sometimes they ask really amazing questions. And the other people are like, yeah, tell me the answer to that. So it's good to work with a group.
Yeah, I mean, I oftentimes I think getting the feedback from others too. You're not just depending on your coach or your instructor, but you're hearing it really from everybody who's going to have a reaction one way or another. So the more positive it is from everybody,
Absolutely,
and it's you're on the right track.
Experience. Yeah, and it's bonding because sometimes people are kind of stuck on something like, how do I approach this? But then now you've got like other people in the class that can say, what about this idea or this idea? And we can brainstorm together to help get over that hurdle. I do want to say, though, that whenever I read a screenplay that is written by an author, I can tell there is just something, even though they do have just the objective approach where it's all what you see and what you hear, there is still something unique about the way that they write that feels more entertaining than just a typical script writer. Like when I write, it's very dry a lot of the time, in the sense that, like, okay, so here's my scene heading, which means this is the location and the time of day that the scene takes place. And then you have an action line that says, this is what's happening. And then we get to dialogue. So when I do my action lines where it's like, this is what's happening, I'm not that clever. I'm just like, get to the point. Now let's have the dialogue where the characters can shine, because that's my favorite part. But when I read a script that was written by an author, those action lines are actually just as entertaining as everything else.
You recommend having a lot of dialogue? Because oftentimes in writing, we're just kind of, it's a show, not tell it.
Mm-hmm.
Still, we don't always incorporate a lot of dialogue. So what about a screenplay? That work best?
Well, because it's a visual and audio experience, right? Like you do need to have dialogue. However, having said that, there is still a lot of room for nonverbal communication, which is one of my favorite things. You know, I love creating, like getting my character to do something that we know what they're thinking and they haven't said a word. I love that. But think of movies like A Quiet Place. There was almost no dialogue in that movie. It was about a family where they had to be quiet because there were monsters that was going to attack them, but the monsters only could attack because of what they heard. They couldn't see anything. They were blind. So everybody had to be quiet. But it was a very intense movie, and you knew exactly what everybody was thinking and feeling the whole way through. There was character development. So what you're going to find is it's going to be according to your story, mm-hmm. and the way that your story and characters would play out.
So let's talk about submitting it to a producer. To me, that sounds like the most intimidating thing. Writing doesn't intimidate me, but I think of it, wow, how do you even begin to pitch it?
Okay. First, you have to know that you have something of value. And with that, let me just tell you, so the statistic for movies that are made that are based on a book is 27 point something percent, like almost 28%. That's like more than 1 in 4 movies is based on a book. So this is actually putting you in a good position already. Now, if your book is selling well, that's also going to put you in a good position. If you have a large social media following or like an emailing list where you can announce to people what's going on and continue to build that, also adding to, the attractiveness of your project. So as you have these things increasing, then a producer is going to put your script at the top of the list, whether like they don't necessarily know anything about it, just the fact that you're already in a better position than all the other scripts.
What you're saying is that pre-marketing is very important to the success of your script being brought.
Well, you're proving that you have an audience, and that's what they want.
Okay, which is really kind of built in, at least for the people that I work with, because pre-marketing for the book is very important. We want people excited, waiting for the book to come out. So in a sense, they've already done a lot of that work. And now they're saying, hey, did you like the book? Just wait. We're going to make a movie out of it.
More. Yeah, exactly.
It seems like today is in this day and age, it's a perfect time too, because it used to be the big screen, Hollywood, the major TV network. But now we have all kinds of live streaming, YouTube, different kinds of opportunities and platform to put movies and TV shows and whatnot. So is that a huge advantage now that we have over, say, 10 or 15 years ago?
Absolutely. Because, okay, so in the past, when Blockbuster was still a thing, when an independent movie was made and it didn't go to the theater, it went straight to, rental stores. A lot of the time, it was really hard for them to market because, unless people actually went to look for them or were open to watching to something that they had not seen advertised on TV, then their movies would not get watched as much. So independent movies were harder to get out there. Whereas today, complete opposite. Because on streaming, if you think about, let's say, whichever streaming platform you watch, there are going to be exponentially more movies available on that streaming platform that did not go to the theater first than the ones that started in the theater.
That sounds great.
Yeah, exactly. And there are so many platforms and there's different ways of distributing. Like you can distribute on Netflix is one, but just so you know, if you distribute on Netflix, they're going to want to have exclusivity, which means that you wouldn't be able to put it on the other platforms. And what people are finding is that when they submit to all of the other platforms that are not exclusive, they end up actually making more money on their project than had they just submitted it to Netflix. So Netflix is kind of like one of those things that people can brag about, but they're not going to make as much money on it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so do you guide them along that entire path to help people understand that part of it, which is a big part of it? That's where you're making the money.
Yeah, well, exactly. And so what we do, part of the program that I have, we definitely help them with their strategy for how to make themselves very attractive to producers, and also understanding which producer to pursue, because the unfortunate reality is that the film industry is like the Wild West sometimes, where you can have a producer say, yeah, I want to buy the rights to make your movie, and you're excited about that, and now you're tied up in a contract, and if they don't make the movie, there is literally nothing you can do about it. You cannot sell those rights to any other producer. And if you didn't pay attention to your contract, they could have that in perpetuity where you maybe every few years they give you a few $1,000s so that they have the rights to make your movie, except they don't make your movie and it goes nowhere. So
why would somebody buy the rights though? Why are they buying the right to not produce it?
Well, okay. So one of the reasons that might happen is maybe they have another project that they think that would be in competition with that one. And so they want to silence yours. Or sometimes they have it as part of their list of movies they plan to make, but it's not as high on the priority. And so this is why choosing the right producer is a really important part of the process. And so that's one of the things that we talk about also. And it's not too hard to do that. You just have to know the how. And a lot of it comes down to finding a producer that's in line with what you are wanting to make, like that is what they do. So if you have a faith-based movie, you want to find a producer that wants to produce a faith-based movie.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm excited. My brain's going because I'm thinking it's not only like authors I work with, but it's like I can do this for me too. Yeah. And that's another audience level.
Yeah. So another part of making your project attractive to a producer is even winning awards. And so that's another thing that because we get the authors that work with us to, write their screenplays, we get their screenplay to a point where it is worthy of winning awards. And then we help them to choose which festivals are a good option to submit to so that they can win those awards. So if you're selling your book, you've got your social media following, your script itself has won awards. When you pitch that to a producer, they're going to be all over it. And not only that, they're going to say, let's do this. They're going to use your script. They're not going to go hire another screenwriter to write your book into a script because you've already done a great job. So if you approach a producer at the beginning without the screenplay and you say, well, I'm going to write the screenplay, though, they'll say no. No, because you haven't proven yourself as a screenwriter.
Right,
So
right.
if you want to write it first.
Okay. So one other thing, we're going to have to wrap up here. I could probably keep you on here for hours because it's a fascinating process that I never thought about before. But what about the filming of it? Because we can say, sure, I'm an author. I can learn in 7 weeks how to put this into a screenplay. But to get an award, to be able to play it at festivals, it has to be a film, right? So are
No.
we hiring somebody? How do you do that?
So when you submit to festivals, you're actually submitting the screenplay itself, not a film. The producers will submit films, but there are competitions for actual just screenplays as they are.
Okay,
so
that makes so much more sense to me. And that just took a huge like roadblock. Like I was thinking like, oh my gosh, that would be a lot.
That's the thing that's really important to understand is that making films is such a collaborative effort. You know, when you do a book, you've got, the author, maybe there's more than one, but you've got the author and the editor and then distribution, and that's pretty much it, I think. But like when it comes to making a film, like you have got so many visionaries in on this process. And so when I write the screenplay, I do my best to write that blueprint for everybody, because that's one of the other things that you keep in mind when you're writing a screenplay. It's not just the story. You're writing a blueprint so that everybody else that comes into the project can follow that. So the actors know what to do, the directors know what to do, lighting, sound. Like there is so much that goes into making it.
Right.
But as the writer, your job, you have to give the blueprint, the instructions or whatever to them, but then you let them do what they do. So you don't have to understand all of what they do.
Thank goodness. I got enough hats that I wear.
Exactly.
That's right. Okay. So how do we get in touch with you? How do we sign up for the course? Let us know what we need to know to get started. It's 7 weeks. I want to have a screenplay.
I want to encourage you to go to writemyscript.academy. So go online, writemyscript.academy, and you can download a free PDF. And that's going to start asking you questions to getting you thinking like, would my story work on the screen? Because that is another reality. Not all of them do. Or if your story, if you're thinking, I'm not sure that this one does, would you be willing to make some adjustments to make it able to fit the screen?
So you do a bit of a vetting process. It's not like you're making false promises. You want to make sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm not saying that somebody is going to complete their script in 7 weeks. That 7-week beginner program is actually just to get you started, to make sure that you're on the right path, you know what you're doing, and then you're good to go. Our other program that takes the authors through the entire thing all the way to having that award-winning screenplay, that is a 10-month program.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. Good to know. Good to know. Yeah. Because, it's one thing to just sort of get started, but I tell my authors that usually the process is 10 to 12 months before they're going to have that book published. So I totally understand that there is such a process, and things like pre-marketing and building your audience and all of that is part of it too, which you can't get that done in 7 weeks. So that really makes a lot more sense. Is that 10 months more one-on-one, or is that still a group setting?
It is a group, but it does come with some one-on-one, like emergency sessions if you're like, I really need to do this. But there is a lot of yes, exactly. There is weekly mentorship. It's group, but it's weekly the whole way through. And so even if you started to kind of drift off in the wrong direction, you're going to, within a week, somebody's going to call you and say, no, come back here. That's not the direction we need to go for that. Or that's not how you do that, or whatever, do it this way. And so then you're back on track right away. It's not like it's once a month where you just spent an entire month trying to accomplish something and only to find out that that's not how you do it.
Yeah.
So it's weekly check-ins, and you can ask whatever questions that you need to. And So the first half of the program, there's a lot of education in there as you're writing your script, developing it, and all of that stuff. And then the second half is where we're working on rewrites. And so there are a lot of classes in the first half. There were fewer classes in the second half because you're more in work mode and rewriting mode. And then we check in and carry on from there.
So I think one last question I had is I have published 3 anthologies, so people are writing chapters, not full book. Is that enough to get you started? Because I have some great stories in the anthologies. The Lemonade Stand, all about people turning their lemons into lemonade, but they're just chapters, so it's not like the 50,000 word book. Can you just take the chapter and expand upon that into a screenplay?
That's a good question. And some of that will depend on what all could go into it. However, you could do it as a shorter, like a short film or even a shorter movie. Like right now with streaming, the movie lengths have started to change. So if you're going to the theater, they should expect to give you something that's 90 to 120 minutes, right? Hour and a half to 2 hours. Whereas streaming, you can watch movies that are 1 hour now, and it's considered a movie. And so it's possible that if you have something shorter, you may be able to fit that within the 1 hour time frame. And sometimes that's easier to get distributed.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because I have an awful lot of people who put in chapters that are fascinating stories. So I'm going to have to think about, some of those people who might actually be able to develop it into a screenplay. So this is great. I hate to say I've got to wrap it up, but time's up. But can you give us again the website of where to go?
Yeah. WriteMyScript.academy. Download your free PDF. Yeah.
Okay. Super. Thank you, Jaclyn, so much for joining us. I really hope that I can get some of my incredible authors to at least give some consideration. And I'm personally excited about it because I never thought I would be tiptoeing into this kind of an arena, even if it's just to help my authors. It's an exciting process. So I look forward to learning more. I think I need to learn how to write a screenplay because it's just a whole different element. We all have beautiful stories, and we need to get those beautiful, wonderful, personal, heartwarming stories out there to the rest of the world. And Jaclyn Whitt, thank you for teaching us a little bit today of how to get that done and how to get that process. So, you guys out there, you'll be talking to Jaclyn. Get your story on film. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in today, and Jaclyn, especially for you. And let's see if we can get some movies out there.
Lemon tree, very pretty, and the lemon flower is sweet, but the fruit of the poor lemon is impossible to eat. Lemon tree, very pretty, and the lemon flower is sweet, but the fruit of the poor lemon is impossible to eat.